Hey everyone, and welcome back. So today we're going to be revisiting what in my opinion are two of the best controller slash Joy-Con options for the Nintendo Switch, because they've actually just received a major update. Now on the controller side, I'm talking about the nyxi or nyxi Chaos controller, a controller that we fully reviewed in the past. However, now it's been upgraded to Hall effect joysticks. Now, if you didn't know, Hall effect joysticks basically mean that they're supposed to be drift proof. So if you've had problems with drifting in the past, these could be an amazing upgrade for you. And secondly, we're going to be looking at the nyxi or nyxi wireless Joy-Cons as well that have received the Hall effect upgrade, but there's actually more changes than that. Number one, naming wise, this is now the Hyperion Pro. When I originally reviewed them back in the day, they were just the nyxi wireless Joy-Cons. However, now they've got two lines of Joy-Cons, and the Pro line is going to be the one that's been upgraded with Hall effect joysticks. Now today's video is going to be a little different. It isn't going to be a ground up review. We're rather going to be looking at what has changed since the last time we saw both these controllers. And if you want to take a more in-depth view on all the features that these controllers have, well, I'll be linking the original reviews down below. They are still very relevant. Now let's jump in and take a closer look at what has changed. Just remember, if you are liking this video, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you aren't already. Now, I want to start today by taking a look at the Chaos controller, because out of the two devices, this is the one that's received the least changes. But also because we've featured this controller twice before already on the channel. Number one, when we did the original review, and number two, when it was in my top wireless Pro controllers for the Nintendo Switch. Now after today, I'll just let you know that it hasn't dethroned the Ultimate controller from 8BitDo, but the gap has become a lot closer between these two controllers now that you have the Hall effect joysticks as well. Now, first of all, if you visit the website of nyxi, what's important is that for the moment, the white model is the one that has the Hall effect controllers, and it's called the flowing model. But the biggest defining feature of this controller is that basically it's offering you everything the official Pro controller has, minus the NFC ability. It has rumble, although it's not HD rumble. You can personalize just how strong you want it to be. You also do have compatibility for motion control with the controller. And you have all the basic buttons that you would expect from a Pro controller, and a pretty decent D-pad as well. Now, in exchange for the lack of that NFC compatibility, however, what you do get is an LED that can actually be customizable to different colors and different effects. But probably what is most of all impressive with this controller are the 4 programmable macro buttons at the back. Now, as I said previously, I would have preferred these 4 buttons to be on separate buttons rather than 2 sides of the same button, but nonetheless, there are 4 available and they are very useful. And all this for a price tag that competes directly with the Nintendo Switch Pro controller at $60, and one that is about $10 cheaper than the 8BitDo Ultimate. By the way, if you do want to pick up any of these controllers, I'll be leaving affiliate links in the video down below, as well as a code to get 10% off. It's a great way to pick up these controllers at a great lower price, and you'll be helping out the channel a little bit at the same time. But now the biggest thing that was separating this from the 8BitDo Ultimate was the fact that this had standard joysticks previously, and now they've been upgraded to Hall effect joysticks. Now, if you're not aware of what this change means, it basically means that they're drift proof. These joysticks should not drift over time. Now, this doesn't mean they're invincible, they can still be physically broken. However, the normal use of these joysticks should not cause drift over time. Now, there is one thing I do want to touch upon about Hall effect joysticks, and that is the fact that although they are very comfortable to use, they don't feel exactly the same as standard joysticks. Basically, there's a little bit less resistance when you tilt the joystick here. Meaning that if you're extremely used to the standard Pro controller, do expect a couple of days of needing to get used to them before you're quite as proficient with this controller as you were with your previous one. But it really is just a muscle memory thing, and once it sets in, it really is a very, very good controller overall. And lastly, before we move on to the Hyperion Pros, if you're wondering what separates this from the 8BitDo Ultimate, since I told you that it didn't dethrone that controller, well, there are 3 minor or major differences depending on what you're looking for. Number one, I think that the D-pad on this controller, although it is very serviceable, is weaker than the one on the 8BitDo Ultimate, but honestly, really nothing compares to that other D-pad. Secondly, the battery life is slightly reduced on this controller. You still get a very respectable about 6 to 8 hours depending on your LED options, but it is not quite up there with the Pro Controller and the 8-bit Do at about 15 to 20 hours. And lastly, although this controller is very easily programmable, it doesn't come with the level of software that the 8-bit Do Ultimate does. However, on the other end, when this controller is on sale or simply when you're using a discount code, you can generally pick it up for almost 25 to 40% cheaper than the 8-bit Do, meaning that in price for performance, this one is nonetheless an extremely competitive option. And personally, I would still select this one over the standard Nintendo Switch Pro controller. Now next, let's take a look at the Hyperion Pro. And out of these two accessories, this is the one that's received the biggest upgrades. At least the biggest upgrade since the last time that I took a look at it. Now first of all, just the same as the nyxi controller, just in case you're wondering, these are fully functional Joy-Cons. They even work wirelessly, they even have motion controls. Basically everything you would expect from the original Nintendo Joy-Cons are here, minus the NFC once again. So the only thing you can't do is read amiibos, but I don't think that is a huge issue for a lot of people, and the upside with these controllers are so major that I really think they're a better option than the original ones from Nintendo. Now the first great thing about these is that they eliminate the need for a grip or any other accessories to make your Nintendo Switch comfortable in hand. Even if you have bigger hands, these are very comfortable, and ultimately they're the best option I've found so far for Joy-Cons. So contrary to previously when we were looking at the nyxi Chaos, which was a good controller but wasn't my first choice, these are my first choice for Joy-Con options. Now first of all, as you can see now that I've turned them on, you have the LEDs as the first difference between the standard Joy-Cons. These add a little bit of visual flair. We're not going to look at how to program them today, but they are programmable in different colors and different effects like breathing effects. But I'll let you look at the previous review if you want to go over exactly how they are programmable. Now added to that, we've got an extremely decent D-pad once again. And if you know, that is one of the biggest downside of using the standard Joy-Cons, is that unfortunately on this side, you don't have your traditional D-pad. Now this has actually changed majorly since the last time that we looked at it. The reason why is that rather than a standard D-pad now, this has clicky buttons, sort of like what we saw on the 3DS from Nintendo. Now, if you're wondering why that's such a huge difference, it's that now these Joy-Cons are actually closer to being able to be used by two different players at the same time. Because although you need to know your button layout by heart, if you're actually using this for two different players, each with one Joy-Con in hand, this now feeling like 4 different buttons makes it actually usable. Now, the downside, however, is that for platformers, this is an excellent D-pad. However, if you play a lot of fighting games on your Switch, it unfortunately, I would say, is a downside then, making rotary motions a little harder with this D-pad. But since the Nintendo Switch isn't exactly known for having the best fighters around, I don't think it's going to be the biggest issue for a lot of people, and overall it is still serviceable for those games. Now other than that, once again, we have programmable buttons at the back. However, this time we only have one programmable button on each side. However, once again, Joy-Con wise, this is a huge upgrade. Oh, and also a feature that I actually forgot about the nyxi, you have turbo ability with this controller. And especially if you play a lot of retro games, the turbo function, let's say you're playing an old school Mega Man game and you don't like mashing, can be a huge upgraded feature. Now lastly, but definitely not least, we have our upgraded thumbsticks, which now have Hall effect sensors in them, meaning that these technically should be drift proof. But there's not only that is really good about them. The thumbsticks are also full-sized, meaning they're extremely comfortable to use and they don't have that reduced motion that the Joy-Cons have. Now theoretically, there is also an option where you can actually remove the top of the joysticks and switch them out. Now there is one issue with that, is that in the box there are no replacement joysticks. I imagine this is a feature that's been designed in for future use, where they're probably going to come out with replacement joysticks sometime later on. So an interesting feature overall, but for the moment, not exactly the most useful one. Now lastly, I want to talk about what is probably one of the most underrated features of these replacement Joy-Cons. And that is the fact that they come with a central unit just like this, and they can be combined into a Pro Controller format. And I've got to tell you, At this point, because of the size and comfort of these controllers when they're in this format, this can actually be used as an everyday Pro Controller for your Nintendo Switch. And I've said this about these Joy-Cons in the past. I personally, when I'm using them out and about, I play in tabletop mode more than in portable format. So I often put my Switch on the table just like this, and especially if you have an OLED model now with the awesome kickstand, it is super efficient. And then I basically play with my Joy-Cons just like this. Oh, and by the way, as you can see, yes, they do wake up the Switch. Now, the only true downside to this use, however, is the battery life in this format isn't the best. You get about 3 or 4 hours out of them. It might not sound like a lot, but trust me, especially if you're using this in tabletop mode, your Switch will run out of battery before the Joy-Cons actually do. Maybe, however, if you're using it as an everyday Pro Controller, it might become a little annoying if you do very long gaming sessions. But the good news, by the way, if you do leave them in this format, is that they also come with a USB-C charger, so you can charge them using a cable. But don't be fooled, this isn't an obligation. They also fully charge when they're on the rails on the Switch, so you don't need to charge them separately. So honestly, if I take them both into frame here, if you have the choice and the budget to only buy one, I would say go with the nyxi Joy-Cons. You've got the best of both worlds. So honestly, it's really awesome when a third-party developer like nyxi takes an existing product and just makes it better. And I would definitely say that if currently you're in the market for a new Pro Controller, but especially if you're in the market for new Joy-Cons, they should definitely be a consideration. I want to hear from all of you. Let me know in the comments down below. Have you tried nyxi products? What are you thinking about them? And are you going to maybe be picking these up for the holiday season? Don't forget, as I said earlier, there will be affiliate links down below, so if you want to help out the channel a little bit, please use those links. There's also a code to get 10% anything off on the site. And on the way out, don't forget that if you did like the content, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you aren't already, and click on that notification bell so you know when all my future content comes out. And as usual, I hope I'll see you in my next video.